Informative Report Hannon Show, Saturday through Monday from 6 to 9 p.m. and a Sunday morning bonus show from 6 to 9 a.m. Jim Bohannon on Guam's only News Talk Superstation, 93.3 The Point.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Hands-on Middle East diplomacy. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has arrived in Israel. He'll meet shortly with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss the truce reached with Hamas last week, which is still holding. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
We need to continue to discuss and have conversations with our key partners in the region who played an instrumental role in getting to the point we reached last Thursday, and also to discuss the path forward on rebuilding Gaza.
During the trip, Secretary Blinken will also meet with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, but not with Hamas, which does not recognize Israel's right to exist. The Justice Department has filed a late-night appeal of a federal judge's order that they must release a memo written in 2019, which then Attorney General William Barr used in part as the basis for the decision not to charge then-President Trump with obstruction of justice in the Russia investigation, following the Mueller investigation, which also brought no charges against Mr. Trump. A threatening package containing a suspicious substance arrived at Senator Rand Paul's home in Kentucky on Monday. It included a picture of the senator with a gun pointed to his head, the FBI now investigating. There's been a mass shooting in central Ohio. 3 people dead in an apartment in West Jefferson, just outside Columbus. An unspecified number of people found dead outside as well. West Jefferson's police chief, Chris Floyd, on a possible motive.
We don't know whether it was a robbery, a target. We don't know at this point. Something brought somebody to a dead-end street.
They've not released any names yet. A new state law governing social media platforms has been signed by Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis.
We're making tech be transparent on their algorithms and on their terms of service and the criteria they use, because they don't apply it fairly.
The new law includes large daily fines against any social media company that removes a candidate from office from its platform. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. Go back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have My Cloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
New questions arising about the origins of the coronavirus.
A previously undisclosed U.S. intelligence report found that researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology sought hospital care after falling ill with symptoms consistent with both COVID-19 and common seasonal illness. A former State Department official tells Fox News that was about a month before COVID-19 was first reported in Wuhan back in November of 2019. The World Health Organization has repeatedly said the virus most likely jumped from bats to humans through another animal. It describes the theory that the virus leaked from a lab as, quote, extremely unlikely, but has not ruled it out.
Fox's Kevin Corke. The Biden administration says it can't make any determination about the virus until it gets more facts from China. A pilot has died after an aircraft operated by a military contractor out of the Nellis Air Force Base crashed nearby in a residential area of Las Vegas Monday. An Air Force statement says the pilot, whose name has not yet been released, died in the crash and there was nobody else on board. President Biden has signed legislation that will permit cruise ships to sail directly from Washington state to Alaska without stopping in Canada. Its ports still closed due to the pandemic. The president will meet Tuesday with relatives of George Floyd on the one-year anniversary of his death in the custody of Minneapolis police. It's almost the swatting and itching season, and there's been a change in where that's the worst.
For the past 7 years, Atlanta was #1 on Orkin's list of top 50 cities with the most mosquitoes. But this year, the new champ is Los Angeles. The The pest control company now has Atlanta at number 2. At number 3, Washington, D.C., then comes Dallas and Chicago. The company says you can cut the populations of the pests by cleaning out areas where they breed. That means cleaning out debris in your gutters and getting rid of areas of standing water. Chris DeMeo, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
This is the sound of connecting with nature, connecting to each other, and the sound of connecting with your finances. With First Hawaiian Bank's new mobile app, you have the power to connect with your finances like never before. With real-time tracking on your financial goals and tailored updates on your accounts, First Hawaiian Bank is putting the power of connection at your fingertips. First Hawaiian Bank, equal housing lender, member FDIC.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Good way to start a program when that program is about the U.S. Constitution, individual rights and freedoms, and the Second Amendment. That's why I read the Second Amendment every day. Moving from the Second Amendment straight on to Zemi Ikotny. Well, the Daily News has got an editorial today. I can't say it's a powerful editorial, but it is an editorial. Support GITA efforts so small businesses can survive. For businesses that have managed to hang on through the pandemic, the Guam Economic Development Authority's grant program to help small businesses could be the difference between businesses closing their doors in a few months or surviving through the end of the year. Although it's difficult to tell just how many businesses have closed due to the pandemic, if we look at the thousands of people on the federal unemployment assistance program, it doesn't take a genius. I guess there are probably several senators then that could do the calculations here. It doesn't take a genius to figure out these folks aren't working because of their former place of employment closed or had to lay off employees. The GITA program, which was made available last year but had to stop because of lack of funding, is one of the few assistance programs on island that directly supported businesses. The economic fallout from the pandemic has hit our small businesses hardest in most industries, but especially businesses that were impacted by the shutdown of our tourism industry. A healthy economy is one in which small businesses flourish. It's a sign of economic maturity. It's a sign of a healthy community. As we see small businesses get picked off by this pandemic, it should be of great concern to our government. When consumers buy from small businesses, the money stays in our economy. Buying local isn't all about loyalty buying local isn't all about loyalty and warmth. It's an economic strategy. The money stays in the community. Well, that's a questionable proposition at best, but I'll let it go for now. When we think of an industry like tourism, it's easy to think about big businesses, hotels, shopping centers, and airlines. But the tourism industry is mostly made up of small businesses, restaurants that line Tumon, small boutiques, cab companies, even busing. Those small businesses employ thousands of people to make that industry thrive. GIDA's program is important to our small businesses, but there needs to be more support to keep small businesses alive on island. The $30 million that GIDA is asking for is less than 10% of the American Rescue Plan that will be granted to Guam. There must be more committed to saving our small businesses before they disappear in even more significant numbers than they have. Well, I have a suggestion for the GIDA Board of Directors. They should ask the governor to have a closed-door meeting so they could tell the governor about what they need, and she could tell them how much they're going to get. And you know, the closed-door meeting is kind of like the anonymous letter. People pay so much more attention to if it's closed-door or anonymous.
So she can tell them how much not to ask for it.
Exactly, yeah. All right, let's go to the Post. The frequency of sexual assaults on children should raise alarms. Last week, a 42-year-old man admitted he sexually abused a little girl for years. The abuse began as early when she was 6. Wow. You know, I'm anti-capital punishment, and I've explained for the 2 reasons why. But when I read something like this, it really puts me to my proofs. And he abused the child when he was drunk, according to court records. When the girl turned 10, her school found out and called authorities, which led to the arrest of Richard Sylvester Kett, who had access to the girl's home. Kett pleaded guilty on Thursday before Superior Court Judge. Now, this is the way they write this story. Kett pleaded guilty on Thursday before Superior Court of Guam Judge Vernon Paris. You know, I was always taught that the fewest words that you could use to say something was the best kind of writing you could do. So if the writer here had not mentioned it was the Superior Court of Guam, we'd have thought it was the Superior Court of Arizona, probably.
I know I would have.
Yeah, named Vernon Paris. That's a dead giveaway. By the time the child molester admitted responsibility, Kett had been free to wait for the outcome of his case for more than 3 years. The child molester, jail records show, spent only a day in jail after he was arrested on May 4, 2018. He was released on May 5 to await the resolution of his case. Kett will remain free until he's sentenced on August 30. He faces 5 to 7 years in prison, according to a recent report. And he also faces deportation to the FSM. Sexual assaults on children have been, unfortunately, a frequently occurring incident on Guam. Almost every week, we're reporting about a child rape or molestation case. And even sadder is the fact that in most cases of child sexual assault on Guam, the perpetrator is often someone the child looked up to, trusted, or maybe even loved. It's a terrifying situation for a child to step forward and summon enough courage to tell someone in school or a trusted adult about the ordeal, even more so to testify. And when she or he realizes, wow, they didn't use the obligatory they, after having gone through all that the perpetrator is still free, how scared would that child feel? It's not easy for a child to come forward and disclose the years of sexual abuse they've suffered. especially when adults can be skeptical of the claim, said prosecuting attorney Christine Tenorio in another unrelated case of child rape. Our justice system needs to do better to make sure children victims do not further face harm by release of suspects or convicts who violated them sexually. It's true the courts have been seeing these cases too often, but the frequency should keep the vigilance higher for all those involved in protecting the children from being exposed to further harm. It's not something that we as a community should even have to ask. We should all be on the same page. The interest of the children comes first and should be second to none. Well, who's going to disagree with this? Yeah? All right. So much for the Post. No bell ringers today. I didn't even need to get my blue pencil out except to make some grammatical some corrections of usage of the language in the stories. Okay, time for the card. I've got Tall Tales versus the Insular Cases, which I now title Tina's, as you were, Tall Tales versus Tina's Myth.
Did I go up for a vote today?
No. Tall Tales versus Tina's Myth, plus Dr. Peter Watson versus Klitzkie, Grijalva, and Bavakwa. Long title. I've got Amata Coleman Raduagan versus Tina. Amata Coleman Raduagan is the delegate to Congress from the territory of American Samoa. And Amata wants to come on Tall Tales and give us the Saipan view of things. So, of course, you're going to be listening to Tall Tales every single day, all the time, anyhow. But be sure you're here at 16:30 on Thursday, because we're going to have Amata calling in from District of Columbia to give us the view from American Samoa. I've got Guam, USA on the card today. That's a Supreme Court case that everybody's talking about. I heard a couple of senators on Ray's show this morning talking about what they're going to do with the money. Well, as usual, I have my bucket of cold water here that I'm going to have to throw on that one. I've got Jim Moylan versus law schools. And this has been on the card before as Jim Moylan versus Jim Moylan. I've got Guam versus the Taliban, and we can win. Then I've got Steve versus Jerry Kitchen. This one's been on the card for a long time, right? I've got Gabbard versus Lightfoot. Tulsi Gabbard is a former congressperson from Hawaii who is saying that the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, needs to resign. And I think you'll agree with Tulsi. I've got the Chinese-American Civil Rights Coalition versus Jonathan Turley and Tall Tales. And it's been on here for a while. David Lebowski versus medical doctors and Bavakwa versus the CNMI. So let's start out with Dr. Peter Watson versus Klitzkie, Grijalva, and Bavakwa. Now this all goes, the thing that started this little fire was Tina's Rule 50, as you were, Resolution 56. And you'll remember Tina pulled out all the stops on this one. She wanted to send a resolution from the Guam legislature to the House of Representatives, specifically Representative Grijalva from Arizona, who chairs the subcommittee that has jurisdiction over territories. And he's introduced a resolution to memorialize the Supreme Court to overrule Downs versus Bidwell. I don't often deal in superlatives, but today I'm going to. One of the dumbest ideas I think I've ever heard, even coming out of the United States Congress. So Tina wanted to support that, and of course the magic word nowadays is racism. If you can't ground your argument on racism, ask yourself, is it really an argument? If it isn't something that you can't tie to racism as its cause, will anyone care? Probably not. So Tina takes a really hard poke at the United States Navy. She quotes a publication called Report of the United States Navy, Guam, 1899 to 1950. And she says that in that report, the Navy calls Chamorros savages, which, you know, even someone down at the Dick and Jane level wouldn't make that mistake. Only someone who hasn't read the report could come off with that one. I got the report. I sent Tina a FOIA, and she sent it back. She did not pull a Talina Nelson and send me a copy of the Organic Act. So I read it, and that the title is, as I said, from 1899 to 1950. But before that, there is like a preface, and it's Guam from 1521 to 1898. And the word savages does appear in there. Nothing to do with Chamorros. It's used in a general way. And it is the second paragraph of that part of the report says that Chamorros were the super race of the Pacific, clever, industrious, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, this resolution, there are legal complications in it, but I think remedial reading would be the first course of action for Tina. So she takes that, and then she has 3 resolutions saying, the same Navy that called the people of Guam savages, you know, wanted to keep their ship Teddy Roosevelt here, and on and on and on. And it's just horrible. You know, if you're going to read Resolution 56, I suggest that you have an emetic and a glass of water handy. Then she goes along and picks up the myth of the insular cases, the Ann Parasitory myth, that that the U.S. Supreme Court in its judgment said these islands are inhabited by alien, quote, alien races, and therefore the U.S. Constitution doesn't have to apply. It's just not what the insular cases say.
Nope.
And anyone who read Downs versus Bidwell would know that. Well, let me put it this way. Anyone who studied Downs versus Bidwell, and I think it's page 186. I've mentioned it on the air before. But, you know, this is one of those things that for Tina, the story was too good to check the facts. Because if you check the facts, maybe it doesn't really come out that way. So she slams the Navy. She misconstrues Downs versus Bidwell. She said that Downs versus Bidwell needs to be overruled because Guam is not eligible for SSI, Medicaid without a cap, and federal highway funds. All 3 of those things really have little to do with Downs versus Bidwell in the insular case. It's just Congress made the decision. You guys don't pay into the Treasury. We're not going to send the full benefit back out. This has been litigated more than once, and the court said, yeah, that'll work. So my suggestion to Tina, I thought she was traveling to the hearing, but actually it was a virtual hearing. So my suggestion to Tina was, if you're going to be talking with Grijalva, you don't go into the insular cases. Just say, hey, Congressman, you could fix this. Introduce a bill. That's all that's necessary. Grijalva thought this was so important that he didn't even chair the committee. He wasn't there. No. The vice chair of the committee, Kilili from Saipan, chaired the hearing. So Grijalva wasn't even there. And our own delegate wasn't there. Now, I'm going to give him high marks for not being there because maybe he wised up and figured out this train has a definite destination. It's not going to Palookaville. There's a switch track so that instead of going to Palookaville, it's going to a place called Trainwreck. And that's exactly where it went. Okay, now, one of the people that testified before that hearing was, let's see here, Dr. Watson, I presume. Yeah, Dr. I've got his first name here somewhere. I'm back to Sherlock Holmes again. Yeah, Dr. Watson, who testified at the hearing, and I went through his testimony before, but he's spiced it up a little bit, and this is how it comes out. He starts out by saying this: asking judges to decide status threatens self-determination. Now, where have you heard that before? Yeah. At the May 12 hearing on the insular cases, House Resolution 279 came to a close. The Vice Speaker, Tina Munya Barnes of Guam Legislature, made these powerful remarks. Congress does not have to wait. This is the opportunity to propose sweeping legislation to address these inequities, protect our individual cultures, and pursue self-determination. This is the time where we can take this opportunity to move forward. So even Tina gets it right once in a while. Sitting in for the committee chairman, Representative Gregorio Sablan, however, got the last word. Quote, self-determination would be an entirely separate issue from today's hearing. Now, you can't say that if you're talking about overruling Downs versus Bidwell. If you do, it just shows that you don't know what you're talking about. From another perspective, it can be urged with the utmost respect to the committee chair that H.R. 279 and the record of that hearing are as much or more about self-determination as about the insular cases litigation in federal court. 279 is an aggressive endorsement of plaintiffs in pending federal lawsuits seeking SSI and Medicare in the territories equal to the states. Guam's Vice Speaker, that's Tina, is of course correct. The insular cases do not prevent Congress from reversing by statute the political decisions made by statute to deny full SSI and Medicare to all territories. However, 279 also seeks to influence another lawsuit about U.S. nationality in American Samoa that is not about statutory equities, but seeks federal court intervention to redefine the constitutional status and rights of all the territories. Naturally, however, this is a political question for Congress, and again, Guam's Vice Speaker is correct that sooner or later Congress must provide a mechanism under federal law for each of five current less than fully self-governing territories to exercise self-determination. Now, one of those cases is pending in Utah, and it's Neil Weir, the guy that Peter Santos branded as a savior. It's Neil Weir's case for people in American Samoa to have birthright citizenship. Now, the resolution asks that the Department of Justice not advance the insular cases in any future litigation. So if the United States Attorney General says, hey, we got this resolution from Congressman Grijalva, he said, don't advance the insular cases anymore. Rewrite these briefs And, of course, once you pull the insular cases out of that Utah case, it's over. Going on with Dr. Peter Watson's article here. Naturally, however, this is a political question for, and by the way, this appeared in Pacific Island Times. Naturally, however, this is a political question for Congress, and again, Guam's vice speaker is correct that sooner or later Congress must provide a mechanism under federal law for each 5 current, less than fully self-governing territories to exercise self-determination, which I have said ever since the beginning of Tall Tales. Congress, pursuant to the doctrine of the unincorporated territories first announced in Downs, can fashion that remedy. If Congress wanted to, they could say, we're amending the Voting Rights, as you were the Voting Rights Act, go ahead and have your plebiscite. Or Congress could say, whatever you guys out there in the Guam legislature decide, that's it. But Congress is like a large toad. It just sits there and eats flies until someone comes along with a sharp object and pokes it in the butt. And then it'll make a lot of noise and it'll jump forward. We haven't poked that toad in the butt. We've made a lot of noise ourselves, like Resolution 56, but we haven't done anything. Okay, Dr. Watson, I suspect that, yeah, let's take a short break here and I'll come back to Dr. Watson.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
All dads should own a Traeger, and this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, so that's where relief lies. Well, how about the Unrepresented People's Organization, UNPO? How about the United Nations? How about the Croatian Society bowling team in Detroit? Any one of those could provide the kind of relief we're looking for. Pay no attention to those folks over there in the Capitol building called the House of Representatives, where we have a delegate. But that's, if self-determination is important, that's where it lies. Okay, now, Dr. Watson goes on, and I suspect that Dr. Watson probably studied under Sherlock Holmes. He's probably really expert on knowing what it means, what Steve means, and what it is that Steve says or what he doesn't say, right?
But pretty much everything is elementary.
Yes, elementary, my dear Watson, of course. Okay, so Dr. Watson goes on and says, but varied supporters of 279 want to use American Samoa as a guinea pig in litigation. No wonder Amata Kabu, as you were Amata Coleman, Radawagon wants to come on Tall Tales. Want to use American Samoa as a guinea pig in litigation instigated by special interest lobbyists to reverse the insular cases through a court order applying the U.S. Constitution directly to American Samoa. And if that Utah case goes the way Neer wants it to go, that's exactly what will happen. Americans, people born in in Samoa are citizens by birth. And I also make the argument that if that's the case, then that means that the U.S. Constitution applied to American Samoa ex proprio vigere of its own force. It means that when the United States raises its flag over a territory over which it exercises sovereignty, the Constitution follows right along with the flag. And that's why I keep going back to Ann Hattori's quote. But if that were the case, then everyone born in the Philippines after 1898 and before 1946 was a citizen, a birthright citizen of the United States. Think about that. Yeah. I wonder if there are any lobbyists from the Philippines supporting Neil Weir. Yeah. And do you think of anybody nobody in the Philippines would want to be a U.S. citizen, would they? Come to Guam?
I rarely see any immigrants here.
Yeah, very seldom do we see people from the Philippines coming here or anywhere. People are escaping. You know, I've been to San Diego a few times, and they've got this huge wall in San Diego to keep people from the United States from escaping into Mexico. If you like the Berlin Wall, you'll love the San Diego Wall. Yeah. Varied supporters of House Resolution 279 want to use American Samoa as a guinea pig in litigation instigated by special interest lobbyists to reverse the insular cases through a court order applying the U.S. Constitution directly to American Samoa against the wishes of its elected and traditional leaders. And the government of American Samoa filed an amicus brief in opposition to Weir's lawsuit. At the same time, 279 demands federal courts treat all 5 territories as a single body politic instead of 5 separate bodies politic under current organic acts. Now, I use the word critarchy in the title of this one. I am against critarchy, as is Tom. He doesn't use the word. Peter. Critarchy means rule by judges, and we've gone an awful long way in that regard in our country. You know, those who like democracy should not seek out their political ends in the courts, because what you get is not democracy, but critarchy. Okay. Demands that federal courts treat all 5 territories as a single body politic instead of 5 separate body politic under current organic acts. That would mean an appellate ruling upholding the lower court ruling in Utah applying the U.S. Constitution directly to American Samoa, as in the states and incorporated territories, presumably would apply to all territories. Thank you, Neil Weir. If the U.S. appeal is not successful and the heavily criticized ruling in American Samoa case is instead upheld, it will mean unelected judges will be changing the current political status of 5 territories without democratic self-determination and consent of the government. Now, how do you like that, Tina? Is that what you had in mind? Unelected judges determining the political status of Guam. Watson goes on to say, I was pleased to assist the committee as a witness in the May 12 hearing, not as a defender or apologist for the insular cases, but to defend an accurate understanding of them. A man after my own heart. It's a tough job. It's a hard uphill climb when Tina throws racism and savages and the insular cases into the mix. It's hard to get people's attention after those shiny objects start floating around. Peter says, personally, I tend to agree with Judge Harlan's dissent in Downs versus Bidwell and with Judge Gelpi on the Federal District Court in Puerto Rico. The, quote, unincorporated territory doctrine of the insular cases was, quote, invented without a constitutional predicate. Well, I may feel the same way, but it's been on the books since 1899, or 1901. So rather than overturn it and suffer the consequences, better to take advantage of it and use it to our advantage. Now, here's the punchline in this whole article. Watson winds up by saying, however, the predictable effect of overruling the actual tax law ruling in Downs. Where did you hear that before? In the Downs decision would be the application of the Uniform Taxation Clause in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1 of the Constitution to all 5 territories. That would mean federal taxes as in the states without any commitment to full equality of representation that only comes with statehood. I've been pounding the table on this. I don't know if anyone, I think people care, but it's so much more fun to talk about savages, races, and Ann Hattori's quote, to actually see what's going on here. And people down there in the legislature, especially you Republicans that signed on for this, Blas and Moylan, you need to get on the floor and act like Republicans and say, don't enact this resolution. Don't encourage Grijalvo to do something that's going to hurt us. Okay, now going on. If denied if denied statehood for U.S. citizens and territories, the only path to, and this is what would happen if Downs is overruled, we would become an incorporated territory. The only place you go from incorporated territory is statehood. That's it. No independence, no other status. So if denied statehood for U.S. citizens in the territories, the only path to equality at the national level would be an Article 5 constitutional amendment to give territories the same rights as states without uniform duties and burdens. How likely is that? The Constitution's been amended 26 times, and there have been literally hundreds of bills introduced to amend. But constitutional amendments are really, really hard to come by. That is why self-determination by the people of each territory on a real status options rather than sweeping judicial activism by unelected judges is that path forward from the insular cases that can unite all Americans. This guy knows what he's... This guy agrees with me. He knows exactly what he's talking about. Surprise, surprise.
Is your pen name Dr. Watson?
It's elementary, my dear Watson. Okay, now let's listen to another view. Bavacqua. Racist depictions of Chamorros help to justify U.S. control. We can't be horsing around with things like self-determination, income tax, etc. We got to go to the heart of the matter. This is Bavacqua's last column.
Look, a squirrel.
Yeah. See the shiny object over there. Don't pay any attention to that tiger that's going to eat you. The House of Representatives is taking up a resolution condemning the racist rhetoric of the insular cases. Bavacqua can't, but it's not that he can't, he won't. He won't go to Downs versus Bidwell and read it. He's too busy reading his old columns. Supporting resolutions have been introduced in different U.S. territories, including Guam. The insular cases, here's a history lesson, were a series of U.S. court cases decided at the start of the 20th century which, among other things, answer the question of whether the U.S. Constitution and citizenship follow and apply to places the U.S. acquires as territories. The answer was no, and part of the rationale at that time was, and here it goes, was that people who lived in territories such as Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico were alien races who were inferior to white Americans.
Nope.
You know, this is the kind of thing that Twitter and Facebook won't allow because it's just wrong. It's just dead wrong. Part of the legacy of these decisions is that Congress can pick and choose which parts of the Constitution and other laws apply to the territories. Furthermore, it reinforces the principle that those living in the territories have no rights except that which Congress allows. If you aren't familiar with the Ansler cases, you won't be after you finish this column either. If you aren't familiar with the Ansler cases, this is sadly one of the limits of our current educational system because it is, for the most part, cut and pasted from the U.S. It doesn't really help U.S. understand what our relationship or lack thereof to the U.S. actually is. What good does it for U.S. U.S. does a lot of teaching, yeah. What good does it for U.S. to teach our children about the Constitution? This guy named U.S. comes lumbering along, and if they aren't also taught how that document applies to those in the territories. It is common to talk about the U.S. as being a promoter of human rights around the world. But why don't our own children learn about whether this is true for its own territories? Citing what's his name, People's History of the United States. You know what I'm talking about.
I know you're talking about.
Yeah. This is the complicated nature of our present, and it stems from a complicated past, one that is defined strongly by U.S. strategic interests and also colonial racism. You got to use the word racism, preferably in every paragraph. The language that is being, and of course I've explained quite clearly that Downs and the Ansler cases, Downs was a commercial case. It wasn't about alien races. It wasn't about citizenship. It was a way that the Supreme Court figured out a way that American tax laws didn't apply to those territories. That was a horrible thing to do to the conquered islands, to come up with a reason that they didn't have to pay U.S. taxes and tariffs. The language that is being condemned from the Ansler cases is something Chamorros knew very well, especially for the first half of the 20th century when Guam was ruled by the Navy. Till 1950, Guam was governed by Navy officers who had total control over the island, including the civil population. Here we go. Every year, the naval governor would send reports to Washington, which often featured characterizations of Chamorros as primitive, backward, lazy, and filthy. Sometimes this was said with clear malice, but more often it was said with haughty benevolence. Take, for instance, the naval governor's report in 1904. Quote, "The Chamorro people are poor, ignorant, very dirty in their habits, but gentle and very religious. They lead lives of Arcadian simplicity and freedom from ambition or desire for change or progress. They are like children, easily controlled and readily influenced by example, good or bad." Well, let's say that Bavacqua didn't make this up. Let's say he got it out of a report. Peter Santos has on more than one occasion pointed us to the phenomenon of presentism, that we take things that people did or said 100 years ago and apply today's morals and ethics to those things and then condemn them according to tomorrow's statement, to today's statements. And it makes a certain amount of sense. So he had a naval governor in 1904 who said bad things, who was a racist. Or maybe he wasn't a racist. Maybe he just called him as he saw him.
We have a solution.
Yeah.
Someone needs to invent a flux capacitor.
Exactly. Exactly. Go back to the future. But, of course, the reason that you do this presentism, is a part of critical race theory. You find, Abraham Lincoln was a racist, so you tear his statue down, and you say because Abraham Lincoln was a racist, anyone who can trace his ancestry back to a slave is entitled to reparations.
Does that mean we cancel the Emancipation Proclamation?
I think so,
Yeesh.
yeah. And Jefferson and Washington, and I saw today that Illinois is changing the name of John Marshall Law School to Chicago Law School. John Marshall, the guy that really created the Supreme Court.
Well, if any place that's shot full of holes.
Exactly. So that's critical race theory. You go back and you find these examples. You apply today's ethics and morals to them, and then you use that as a springboard to make your demands as to what you want. Okay, let me make take a quick break, and I'll come back to Bavacqua.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tucumán has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. A true taste of Guam.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
A homeowner's policy protects much more than just your house. It also protects you against claims from someone being hurt on your property. If a visitor is injured at your place, how much are you covered for? The smart thing to do is get the answer today.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Yeah, so give me just a second here. All right. Yeah. So critical race theory, and that is Bavacqua. That's what he's doing with all his columns, all his rhetoric. He's stumping for independence because the United States, because a naval governor in 1904 said something he doesn't like. Guam should become independent, and he should become the guy who says things people don't like, right? Okay, now he goes on. Here's his theory. Part of the rhetoric of these reports was to justify the U.S. dominance over Guam. No, not from a naval governor. A naval governor doesn't care if there's dominance over Guam or whatever. A naval governor was sent here up until 1950 for the same reason that a captain was assigned to a ship. He's in charge. He has a mission. He's to accomplish his mission. Part of his mission was sending these reports back. And I've explained, that after our battleships, our warships stopped using oil, the U.S. really didn't know what to do with Guam. Because the reason that when the Treaty of Paris was entered into, the United States wanted the Philippines for the China trade, Puerto Rico as because of the U.S.'s interest in the Caribbean region, and Guam for one reason only, as a coaling station between Pearl Harbor and Manila. The United States got Pearl Harbor on a lease in 1891. Didn't even need to have to wait for statehood. So that's the only reason that the Navy wanted Guam. The United States probably could have asked for all of Micronesia, But yes, U.S. only asked for Guam. That's why the Northern Marianas are the Northern Marianas instead of part of the, of a single territory. But after warships stopped burning coal and started burning oil, there really wasn't any reason for the U.S. to hang on to Guam, especially after the United States entered into a treaty called the Washington Treaty 1922, where the major powers agreed to a ratio of capital ships, and the United States agreed not to fortify Guam. So we'd had a Marine Corps seaplane base, and the ramp is still down at Naval Station. We had a Marine Corps seaplane base at Naval Station, which we shut down because of that. So here's the Navy with an island with maybe 150 Marines on it, do a teaching school, being cops, etc. No useful purpose, but, it was a small island. It was far away. The Toad just sat there and did nothing with it until World War II. That changed everything for Guam. That literally put Guam on the map as far as the United States was concerned. And we all know what happened after that. But to say part of the rhetoric of those reports, in other words, the Guam Naval Governor's reports, was to justify the U.S. dominance over Guam, that's just something he made up. There's no substance to that. Then he goes on to say the flag was flying over the island. The U.S. claimed to be a beacon of democracy and freedom, but none of these things were allowed to exist at that time, and that's true. Guam was under martial law. The naval governor had absolute power. He was executive, legislature, and judiciary. Now, he had the assistance of deputies and assistants, and there were, in-house courts, and on two different occasions, the naval governor, by naval governor's order, set up legislatures, but he had the supreme power. So to trace that back to what that naval governor reported, no. Pavakwa goes on to say the racist depictions of Chamorros helped to justify the U.S. government controlling their lands and their lives by portraying them as helpless and in need of being saved by the U.S. I'll be talking more about this rhetoric next week and why it may be important to critique it even more than a century later. Critique it, but leave Downs versus Bidwell alone. So this is his take on Downs versus Bidwell. Probably the most important issue for anyone who's really interested in self-determination is Downs versus Bidwell not being overridden. But as I've said so many times, who wants to talk about court cases and holdings and what the judge said when you could talk about racism? That's a whole lot more fun. Yeah.
And easy.
And so much easier, because you don't really have to know what you're talking about. And you'll find a responsive audience out there, and Tina Rose Munya Barnes, several of the senators, including 2 Republicans. Okay, next is the big news today, Guam versus USA. I've talked about this a little bit before the decision was actually made, and I'm going to tell you some stuff that you probably didn't know about this case. The case involves, well, first of all, what it's not. This case is not about Guam. This case is about statutory construction. Now, the Supreme Court does a couple of things. It rules on statutory construction. In other words, here's a federal statute. People disagree as to what it exactly means. The Supreme Court interprets that statute and says, here's what it means, gang. The Supreme Court looks at statutes, state, local, whatever, and says, this is constitutional or it's not constitutional. 2 different things. Guam versus the United States. I'll come back to Guam. I'll come back to Guam right after the big halftime show.
The Point is KUSG, Hagatna, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
A mass shooting in Ohio. And Fox News. 3 people found dead in an apartment. More victims outside in the town of West Jefferson, about 20 minutes west of Columbus.
Here's what the chief is saying right now. At least 3 people were found dead inside this apartment. Others were found dead outside, believed to be a shooting at this point, and they are not revealing the names of anybody who was killed.
Reporter Haley Nelson of Fox 28 in Columbus. Police say so far they have no motive. It's been a year today since George Floyd died while being restrained by a Minneapolis police officer. Today, members of the Floyd family will meet with President Biden.
Marking the anniversary, a day that certainly impacted him personally and impacted millions of Americans, but he wanted this meeting to be private in order to have a real conversation.
Convicted of murdering George Floyd, former police officer Derek Chauvin is to be sentenced next month. The FBI investigating a threatening package mailed to the home of Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. The large envelope arrived yesterday with white powder inside and a profane threat to finish what your neighbor started. The senator had suffered several broken ribs in 2017 when his former neighbor assaulted him. More states rolling back coronavirus restrictions.
New COVID-19 cases continue to plummet, a welcome sign for many states.
Outdoor capacity limits and the curfew on bars and restaurants will be lifted.
Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer lifting a handful of COVID restrictions for businesses on Monday. Meanwhile, big changes in the Big Apple. New York City schools will be back to full capacity this fall. Teachers will no longer have access to work from home, and students will have no option to learn remotely.
Fox's Kevin Cork. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
An easily overlooked part of covering our home is what's inside of it. Over time, we buy things we don't want to lose, but don't update our contents coverage. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
The White House says its deadline is approaching for a deal on infrastructure spending.
President Biden says Memorial Day is the target for progress on talks with Republicans on an infrastructure deal.
I would say we're eager to see their proposal and see what they have to offer.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki says Republicans must come up on their proposal for infrastructure spending. Differences remain over the size, scope, and even definition of infrastructure.
And we'll continue to look for ways to move forward in a bipartisan manner. We're not quite there.
Without a bipartisan bill, Democrats could try to use a tool called budget reconciliation to pass infrastructure spending without Republican support. At the White House, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
The Justice Department has appealed a federal judge's order that says it must release a memo that former Attorney General William Barr relied on in deciding not to charge former President Trump with obstruction after the Russia investigation. Secretary of State Blinken has arrived in Israel. He's about to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu about the ceasefire that's ended a week and a half of hostilities in Gaza. The right to carry a firearm in the Lone Star State is about to become nearly absolute.
The Republican-controlled legislature in Texas has approved a bill allowing people to carry guns without a license. Background checks and firearms training will also not be required. Texas already has more than 1.5 million licensed gun carriers. This measure would allow unlicensed carry, provided there are no convictions or other legal reasons they could not. A number of law enforcement and gun control groups opposed this, given recent deadly mass shootings in the state. Supporters say it allows people to better defend themselves in public. Businesses can still choose to ban guns on their property. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Busy week? Mezcla Bistro in Tumon has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tumon. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Do you dread waiting in those long, inconvenient lines? That's why you won't find them at Bank Pacific. We're back to our pre-COVID Monday to Saturday hours with all of our branches open. You know, that where others put branches, we place roots thing. And if you don't want to come to the bank, we have MyCloud Banking through which you can go to the bank on any of your devices, including through our new cool mobile banking platform with remote capture so you can deposit checks from anywhere. Offline, online, no line. Bank Pacific. Where others put branches, we place roots and rooting for you. Member FDIC.
Hey, big news! Now you can listen to The Point on radio.com. And radio.com gives you so much more. Local news stations give you what's going on in your community, yet national news from CBS, CNN, or Fox News Radio. Take a break with one of the hundreds of music, sports, and talk stations. Love podcasts? Radio.com has thousands of true crime, comedy, kids and family podcasts, and more. Listen anytime, anywhere. On your PC, smart speakers, and a variety of connected devices. Or download the Radio.com app now from the App Store or Google Play.
Okay, so here we are back in Guam, talking about Guam versus the United States and the fact that the Supreme Court of the United States ruled in Guam's favor on the suit, on a case pending before it. And I'm going to start out by telling you what the case isn't about. It's not about what bad people the Navy are, calling the people of Guam savages. It's not about racism. It's not about indigenous people.
Nope.
It's not about colonizers. It's really not even about Guam. Well, I thought it was Guam versus the United States. You know, how could Guam ever beat the United States? Well, I did a little research and I found the questions that Guam's attorneys offered to the Supreme Court in its petition for writ of certiorari. Question number 1, whether a non-CERCLA settlement can trigger a contribution claim under CERCLA Section 13F3B. Question 2, whether a settlement that expressly disclaims any liability determination and leaves the settling party exposed to future liability can trigger a contribution claim under CERCLA Section 113F3B. So what our guys were looking for was to the first question, to both questions, no, that the statute didn't run. So these were the questions. Now, I want you to notice nothing in there about indigenous people, colonization, all of the things that that we like to talk about here while we ignore the really important stuff. So it was a case that dealt with when a statute of limitations begins to run. And the reason that the case went before the Supreme Court is because three circuit courts of appeal went the opposite direction from the Ninth, which ruled against us, and the Second, which also ruled against us. So there are 13 circuit courts, and when the circuits are divided, that is when they have different rulings on the same question of law, there's a really good chance that the Supreme Court will grant certiorari to bring a couple of those cases before it to settle that question so that the law is uniform throughout the United States. Apparently, the Guam case clearly laid out the issues to be decided, and it came at the right time. So that's the reason that the Supreme Court decided to grant cert to Guam, not because they were saying, boy, the Navy really screwed over Guam. We got to do something to help Guam out on that one. It's not what the case was about. And when I was talking on ratio this morning, I said it's a boring case to read as Supreme Court decisions are concerned. It's all statutory construction. There's no overarching constitutional doctrine, discussion of policy, or anything really very sexy about the case. It's just a very dry statutory construction case. I said that the separatists won't like it because it didn't really address the important questions like Bavacqua would. And the non-separatists would say, yeah, it's a good case. It showed that even an island with 166,000 people, 210 square miles, 8,000 miles away from Washington, can get to the United States Supreme Court. Those who liked the demagogue probably didn't like it very well, although I got a hand. I heard leaving on a jet plane's press conference, he found a way to demagogue. Yeah, he did. We've been fighting this for decades. First I heard about it. You know, the United States government had to sue us to get us to close that dump. And we had not been fighting it for decades. As a matter of fact, his office dropped the ball after that settlement agreement. And without being too technical, let's say that there's possibly a 3-year statute of limitations and a 6-year statute of limitations. And you want to file suit against the United States. Which statute of limitations do you pay attention to?
My math,
yeah,
not Tello's math, says 3.
Yeah, you don't take a risk. You err on the side of caution. Well, obviously that didn't happen. Yeah, it didn't happen. No suit was filed because when Guam finally got around to filing a suit, the United States moved to dismiss. And the district court in the District of Columbia denied the motion. The United States took the case to the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit reversed. We asked for a rehearing. The Ninth Circuit sustained. The United States, there was an application for appeal en banc. There was an en banc hearing, denied, and a motion for reconsider. All those, every single one of those, right? Now, another important thing here is that this case went to the Ninth Circuit on an interlocutory appeal. The case wasn't over, but there are ways that intermediate questions can be handled on interlocutory appeals. That's how it was decided. So, no, we haven't been. We've been screwing out for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so. Elizabeth Barrett Anderson filed the suit that finally got to the Supreme Court in 2017. I don't remember who the Attorney General was when the settlement agreement was entered into. So the questions, once again, are whether a non-CERCLA settlement can trigger a contribution claim under CERCLA, or whether a settlement that expressly disclaims any liability and leaves the settling party exposed to future liability can trigger a contribution claim under CERCLA. Let's get out our law and order notebooks, and I'll tell you what a contribution claim is. Contribution lies among joint tortfeasors. So let me give you an example. Let's say that Jose and I and 3 other people carelessly set somebody's barn on fire. We were negligent. And that person sues, and he's able to prove that all 5 of us were negligent. So he gets a judgment in his favor. But I'm the only one that's got any money, being this, having this super well-paid job. So he makes all of his collection efforts after me. Well, I can bring a claim against the other 4 for contribution. It's another sort of a suit, or I can actually plead it in the initial lawsuit so that it would be Barnman versus Bob, Jose, and 3 others. And then there's more litigation inside where the 3 others cross-claim against one another for contribution. Now, this has been modified by statute, so don't try this at home. But that's what contribution means. So if the statute hadn't run, then Guam can sue the United States government on a suit for contribution. Whatever we paid, you got to reimburse some of it. Obviously, you can't get more in contribution than what you paid out yourself. So that's what it's about. But our Attorney General was able to demagogue it. He said, we've been fighting this for decades. And then he quoted Martin Luther King. He said, the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. So, whenever you hear people talking in terms of justice, watch out, because there's usually a trick involved. And the old lawyer's joke is this one. There was a company that did business in New York. It was headquartered in New York, and they had a factory in California. And someone sued their factory in California, so they sent their lawyer out to California to handle the suit. And the owners back in New York were anxious to find out how that suit came out. So the owner calls up the lawyer and says, is it over? And the lawyer said, yeah, the verdict just came in today. How did it turn out? The lawyer said, justice triumphed. And the owner said, well, then appeal, damn it. So justice usually, for most people, justice means I won, right? Well, I'm going to tell you that we didn't win. And I'll explain in a few minutes why there's a long way before we can actually say that we won. But I will tell you that justice was done. We have a functioning court system in our country. We have a federal court system that, although I'm critical of it, sometimes functions very, very well. And even small islands in the Western Pacific have access to that system, and they have the ability to take their case all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States and get a ruling. Regardless of what the ruling was, that is justice. Justice doesn't mean, well, the good guys won, or it was fair.
It's like a team's not allowed to go on the field, and then finally the ref says, you guys can play. You don't go, yeah, we won. Yeah. You haven't played the game yet.
That's exactly where we are right now. But Levin was able to do some demagoguing there, a little virtue signaling, a little bit of demagoguing. And then I heard a couple of guys this morning, a couple of senators on Ray's show this morning, figuring out what we're going to do with the money that's going to come rolling in. Because, quote, we won, right? So I have a good article here from Scottish Blog. Supreme Court on Monday sided with Guam in its dispute with the federal government over the cleanup costs of toxic waste on the island. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the opinion for a unanimous court just 4 weeks after oral argument in the case. Now, here are some interesting things so far, okay? I've never, in the times I've been following, I've never seen the court decide a case so quickly. What happens is they have oral argument Monday, Tuesday, etc. They have conference on Friday, and they sit in and they have a meeting behind closed doors, yeah, and they decide how they want the case to come out. And the Chief Justice, if the Chief Justice is in the majority, he assigns the person to write the opinion. If not, somebody in the minority is assigned to do the opinion. Justices decide whether they're going to do concurrences, dissents, etc., and then they go away to write their opinions, which means they shovel off huge piles of work to their law clerks. And usually it's a 2, 3, 4 month process before an opinion comes grinding out of that mill. But here, less than 4 weeks, and we had an opinion coming back. That's pretty amazing. Second, Justice Thomas wrote the opinion. Now, Justice Thomas is being kind of billed as this year's Sandra Day Thomas, or this year's Tony Kennedy. In other words, kind of the swing vote. Since Roberts has kind of drifted over to the Liberals, so Thomas is kind of the star right now, which is good, because he's my favorite justice. So he wrote the opinion. And then the other thing is this. I've read up on the Supreme Court, and the cases that they don't like very much are state versus state and Indian law cases. They just aren't much fun. And this case was not much fun. Clarence Thomas is not going to get his name in case books in law schools, or, this is not going to be his legacy case. It wasn't much fun for him. So ordinarily, the cases that are dogs get assigned to the newest justice. So this should have gone to Amy Coney Barrett, but it didn't. So that's pretty unusual. And then the third thing that doesn't happen that often, 9-0. After all of that litigation in the courts of appeals, rehearings on bank, etc., en banc. So if you'd have followed it through the Court of Appeals, you'd have said, man, this is going to be a tough case. This will be a 5-4 for sure, because the issues are such that reasonable people could disagree. Well, they got this out of there really quick. And maybe they just said, this is an easy case. Let's find in favor of an unrestrictive approach to the statute of limitations issue, and we'll let it go at that. But anyhow, that's how it went. And then a summary of what the case is all about. Involves the territory's efforts to require the Navy to share the cost of cleaning up the Ordot dump, a Superfund site where the Navy allegedly dumped toxic waste for decades. The federal Superfund statute, the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. No wonder people call it CERCLE. Allows contribution claims to be brought under Section 113F3B. That provision provides that a person who has resolved its liability to the United States for some or all of a response action, or for some or all of the costs of such action, and a settlement may seek contribution from any person who is not already party to a qualifying settlement. Contribution. Before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit, the Navy had successfully argued that Guam's claim was time-barred because its settlement of the Clean Water Act suit by the EPA in 2004 had triggered the contribution provision, 3-year statute of limitations. At the Supreme Court, Guam argued that only a settlement of CERCLA specific liability and not a Clean Water Act settlement could trigger the statute. The court agreed with Guam that only a settlement of CERCLA specific liability could trigger the statute of limitations for Guam's contribution claim. Writing for the court, Thomas focused on the statutory text and its repeated reference to CERCLA-specific terms such as response cost and response actions. He rejected the Navy's argument that because the Clean Water Act settlement involved pollution from the ORDOT dump, it was sufficient to trigger the statute of limitations. Quote, to be sure, as the government points out, remedial measures that a party takes under another environmental statute might resemble steps taken in a formal CERCLA response action, Thomas wrote, but relying on that functional overlap to reinterpret the phrase resolved its liability for some or all of a response action to mean, quote, settled an environmental liability that might be actionable under CERCLA would stretch the statute beyond Congress' actual language. Thus, the court held that CERCLA contribution requires resolution of a CERCLA-specific liability. As a result of the decision, Guam will be able to proceed with its action against the Navy for recovery of cleanup costs associated with the ORDOT dump. So there it is. You know, a statute of limitations question. You got to give the U.S. lawyers, the Department of Justice lawyers, credit for good lawyering. They did what lawyers get paid to do. If anyone is sued, let's say that Mr. X is sued, let's go back to that barn case. And Mr. X, or let's say that I could prove for sure that I had nothing to do with that barn fire because I was in Palookaville at the time the fire started. If the plaintiff had waited too long and the statute had run, I would move to dismiss on the statute of limitations. It's cheaper to win that way than to go the long road. For lawyers, a matter of professional liability. If your client has a statute of limitations defense and you don't plead it and you don't advance it, you've committed malpractice. Unless your client expressly said, I understand, I know I could do it, I don't want you to do it. Otherwise, you got professional liability. So this is all lawyers. It's not, once again, it's really not about Guam. And it is about justice because here you are, talk about David and Goliath, gigantic federal government, huge Department of Justice, Chief, as you were, Attorney General of the United States, Solicitor General of the United States. You know, this is big lumbering giant, and we come up there with our little slingshot and whap. And the Supreme Court says, you guys won. Federal government, you lost.
Good job to beat.
Yeah, so that's justice. Okay, now, when will they be sending the check? It's going to be a long, long time. Because remember, this is a ruling on a motion to dismiss at the very beginning of the case on an interlocutory appeal. So the United States now can file an answer or maybe another motion. It's hard to say. Or an answer. And then the next thing that will happen is what's called discovery. And Guam can serve requests for production of documents on the United States, get the U.S. government to come up with any kinds of documents to show that it actually dumped stuff into the ORDOT dump. written interrogatories, questions that must be answered under oath, oral depositions, requests for admissions. It's a lengthy process, but it really helps win a case. Okay, let's go to Chicago for the seventh inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts, brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Busy week? Mescla Bistro in Tucumán has you covered. Let us take the worries out of your dinner meal planning. Check out our daily specials or enjoy some of your local favorites. Plus, receive a free kids meal with each adult dinner entree purchased Monday through Thursday. Call 969-2652 for more information or to make a reservation at the Grand Plaza Hotel in Tucumán. And don't forget, Jack Larimer is live every Saturday night. Mescla Chamorro Fusion Bistro, a true taste of Guam.
Okay, so here we are, seventh inning stretch, Wrigley Field in Chicago, and we're still talking about Guam versus the United States and how we have prevailed at this end of the litigation. And I got to turn my iPad off here. So there will be voluminous discovery. The United States will be serving discovery on the government of Guam. Because remember now, we have to prove that the Navy dumped anything in the Ordot dump. And this is another one of those cases where that well-known rule of law called everybody knows. Everybody knows that the Navy dumped stuff up there. They're just trying to get out of it. Well, that's true. But we have to prove that the Navy dumped stuff up there. And we probably have to prove what exactly it was. And then, if we're able to do that, the amount of damages is apportioned between what we put in the Ordot dump and what the Navy put in the Ordot dump. So if it could be proven that of all of the content in the dump, was 40% of it was put there by the Navy and 60% by us, that's what we'll get. We'll get a reimbursement of 40% of our costs. Now we also have to prove up what our costs are. And I suppose the beginning of that is all of the money that we spent with Garson, Bricker, and whatever their name was, closing the dump, doing the landfill, and all the rest of that stuff. There may be more because we're going to have future costs. So this will be the subject of some motion practice. Both sides will more than likely call in experts, or the court may appoint a referee to do the apportionment of damages once we figure out who did what to that piece of ground called Ordot dump. Once that's all done, then the court will write up a ruling saying, here's how much stuff was there, here's how much the Navy put in, here's how much the government of Guam put in, here's how much the government of Guam spent, here's how much the government of Guam will get reimbursed, judgment for the government of Guam in that amount, and a check will come from the Treasury unless, guess what? The United States appeals. So there's a rule here that goes with brooding hens. It deals with eggs. Don't count your eggs until they've hatched. So let's not be making too many plans about how we're going to spend this windfall. In fact, only people who are relatively young should get involved with making those plans, because it's going to take a while. My stack's not working, Jose.
Again, you have another Joe on 1 and Mark on 2.
Somebody who wants to make his mark.
Another Mark wants to make a mark.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll mark it. Another Joe first, and then another Mark, right? Good afternoon, another Joe. What can you tell me about Guam versus USA? Oh. Good afternoon, another Joe. What can you tell me about Guam, USA? Hello? Another Joe? Not only is my stack not working, my phone's not working either.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
Let me try Mark. Let's put another Joe back on hold. Mark, are you there? It's not working.
We may be having phone issues.
We may be having phone issues, he said. All right, I'm going to hang up. Give it about 5 minutes and try again, guys. Maybe the phone will wise up and let you guys in. I really wish I could take these calls. I've been talking the whole time. I need a break. Okay, so that's Guam versus USA. I told you what it wasn't. I told you what it was. I told you what you can expect in the future. I'll even make a prediction here that I don't know when the Navy stopped dumping stuff in the ORDOT dump, but given the amount of stuff the amount of garbage that the ORDOT dump that the Navy would generate and the amount that we generated, I expect most of the trash in there is probably ours by bulk. I expected most of the nasty stuff in there is probably ours. Now, I don't know if the law is such that there's an apportionment based on that. I suspect not. I suspect it'll be just a matter of a calculator and some division. But as usual, I will watch this litigation like a hawk, and rather than getting the, hey, we won, let's have a party approach to it, you tune into Tall Tales and you'll get what Paul Harvey used to refer to as the rest of the story. Okay, moving right along, I've got Jim Moylan versus law schools. Ordinarily, people go to law school to learn what the law is. They become lawyers, and if they're asking for points of law, they would ask a lawyer, and quite often, if they are engaged in an argument where the law is an issue, they'll cite to a statute like 5 GCA 8103 or a court case like Downs versus Bidwell. But Jim Moylan has figured out another way of doing it. He has figured out that you could skip law school and create and achieve the same result by sending out press releases. And I read Jim's press release here. Was it yesterday? His press release became a news story on the night of May 24th. The Daily News picked it up today. A group of Republican senators introduced legislation that would require meetings between the governor and all members of the Guam legislature to be open to the public. Recently, Guam Governor Lulian Guerrero met with senators to discuss how the American Rescue Plan would be used. The meeting was closed to the public and was followed by a press conference. On Monday, Oh, as you wait. Let's see. Did I get my pages mixed up here? Well, I guess I did. All right, anyhow, let me go to the part where Jim shows us he really knows what the law is in this daily news story. Guam law allows any meeting called by the governor of Guam where they invite senators to be the legislature to be closed to the public, and likewise any meeting where the speaker, blah, blah, blah. That discussion can also be in a secret environment, Moylan said in a press release Monday. While these meetings may not involve deliberations, actions, decisions, or even a vote, such meetings consist of intricate conversations which impact the public and should never be closed to the public. During the recent closed meetings, reporters were kept outside. The only information about the meeting came from interviews and statements from the participants. So if you look at the open government law, it says you can't have a meeting of board, commission, or legislature where you discuss. You don't have to decide, only discuss the public's business unless you go through the open government formalities. And you won't find anything in Guam law that talks in terms of meetings by the governor with the legislature. That just isn't there. There's a whole title on the legislature. There's a whole title on the executive, but there's no title or no chapter in the law that says joint meetings of the governor and the legislature. And there's a good reason for that. The reason for that is that's not how our government is set up. We're not Parliament. In Parliament, the members of the Parliament elect the Prime Minister, and they all sit down together and go at it in one chamber. We're not Parliament. So we have separation of powers. The governor has her situation, the legislature has it. And if you guys really if she really wanted to talk to you, what she should have done, Jim, instead of practicing law here, you should have asked the speaker to invite her to a session of the legislature. She arrives, you give her privilege of the floor, you resolve into the committee of the whole, you have your conversation in front of the cameras, the public, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, anybody else who wants to watch. But there's nothing in the law that contemplates a meeting between the governor and the legislature, so it doesn't make sense to have a statute that says that when they have these meetings, they can't do it behind closed doors.
Can it also be known as the open government law says the legislature can't meet in secret if they're doing certain things, right?
Caucus,
right?
That's it.
Just caucus.
That's all.
The other exception is not unless it's with the governor.
No.
Okay.
No, and there's no statutory, if there were a provision in law that said joint conferences, and it was silent on the closed doors, maybe they'd have a point, but that takes a lot of imagination. So I've got Bill 141 here. Legislature find that, here's what he says in his bill. Legislature find that Guam law allows any meeting between the governor of Guam where they invite senators of the Guam legislature to be closed to the public. He's found that in Guam law. Guam law allows this. So somewhere, if he followed my rule, he'd have to say at 5 GCA section blah, 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 there's a provision that said that the governor and the legislature may meet behind closed doors, because that's what he says. But there's no such provision. While these meetings may not involve deliberations, actions, decisions, or even a vote, okay, now he left out the word discussions handily, didn't he? Yeah, which is in the open government law. Such meetings comprise of intricate conversations which impact the community and should never be closed to the public. Really? Jim Moylan said these meetings should never be closed to the public. Well, I just got a news flash, right? Jim Moylan has a floor amendment that he's going to introduce. And his floor amendment will require the probation division of the Superior Court to furnish ankle monitors to every one of the 14 senators. And the probation division will monitor these ankle bracelets. And if any senator is in the proximity of the governor's chambers, the bracelet will alert the probation division, who will contact Tall Tales. Yeah, Jim Moylan's own bill. These meetings may not deliberate, etc. Such meetings comprise of intricate conversations which impact the community and should never be closed to the public. Never. It's understood that there are circumstances when a government meeting can remain closed, such as caucus or strategic discussions among elected officials. Well, yeah, strategic discussions among elected officials. You get the public auditor, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker. They can all have this, because they're not a collective body. The open government law applies to collective bodies. Wow. And it goes on, advising the media on the content of the meeting after the meeting concludes is not exactly an act of transparency. Wow. Jim's got a mind like a steel trap, telling the media afterwards that, no, that's not exactly an act of transparency. This act would assure that any meeting between a governor and all senators, so you're safe because Joanne Brown ain't gone. So Jim's bill wouldn't reach the current legislature. This act would assure that any meetings between a governor and all senators shall follow the guidelines pursuant to Guam's open meetings law statutes. Yeah. And then he adds a new item 6 to definitions. And it says, when a Magahagan Guahan requests for a meeting with all senators through the Speaker of the legislature, blah, 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 the meeting location shall be considered a public agency. Now Lou's going to hold them at her beach down in Iran. So Lou's public beach automatically becomes a government. Good drafting, Jim. Way to work.
Seize that property.
And that meeting shall be subject to the requirements of an open meeting pursuant to Section 8103 of this chapter. And then he also amends B, except when Imagahagan Guaham requests for a meeting with all senators through the Speaker, blah, 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 such meeting shall be subject to the requirements of open meeting pursuant to Section 8103 of this chapter. And then finally, except when Imagahaga requests for a meeting with all senators, or it's blah, 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 in which case such meeting, even if no action pursuant to the definition in this subsection is pursued, shall be subject to the, that's great. It's just wonderful. But Jim, if only we could turn back the clock, because in his own bill, Jim fesses up here. Such meetings should never be closed to the public.
Maybe Senator Moylan and Dr. Bavacqua can work on that DeLorean together.
Really? Now, I remember something going back to my Wisconsin days. There's a famous Supreme Court case called Wisconsin versus Constantino. And what it goes to is a blacklist. And if a person had a drinking problem, he could go to the mayor and have himself put on this list. And the list would be circulated to every tavern in town and every liquor store. And the person whose name was on that list could not buy beer. No matter, forget about, I'm going to change, I'm going to the mayor, I'm going to withdraw. Sorry, Charlie.
Denied.
Denied. And there was also a provision for someone to put a drinker on that list involuntarily. And that's where Wisconsin versus Continu came up. It's a liberty interest case. It said doing that without giving her any due process was a denial of her liberty under 14th Amendment. But anyhow, the reason I brought that up is that if you thought you had a drinking problem, you could take action to forbid the taverns from serving you liquor. So, Jim, this is what you need. In Wisconsin, they didn't say we're going to make the sale of liquor illegal, which is kind of what Jim's doing. We can't help ourselves here, so we're going to make what we did illegal in the future. Good legislation, Jim. All right, let's head for Churchill Downs.
Dads should own a Traeger. And this Father's Day, you can win a Traeger smoker grill for your dad and feast on flavorful wood-fire crafted meals. Cooked with a flip of a switch. Cook low and slow or high and fast with digital precision on your Traeger pellet grill. Purchase $35 or more in fuel at 76 Circle K and enter to win. Gas up today and join Circle K's Father's Day package giveaway. A Traeger smoker grill, a canopy, a cooler full of meat, and 2 cases of Bud or Bud Light are up for grabs only at Circle K. Conditions apply. Visit 76CircleKGuam.com.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
Yeah, here I am. I was trying to fix something here and it didn't work. Next item on the card, Guam versus the Taliban. I guess everybody out there knows that the Taliban is that gang in Afghanistan that we've been fighting for the last 20 years. And there's a story that ran in the Post. Guam pitched as interim haven for Afghan follies. Now, I probably shouldn't bring this forward to today. I should wait until next Monday so that Bavacqua has the opportunity to write his usual racist column about this particular subject. So I'll do it today, and then I can refer back to this. Guam officials, as of Friday, were still learning more about an advocacy group's push for the use of Guam as a temporary location for thousands of Afghan interpreters who helped American troops while their visas are being processed to resettle in the United States. Some members of Congress, quoted by national media, without Tello's permission, also expressed support for the use of Guam, which also hosted refugees to await visa processing after the Vietnam War and the first Gulf War. That's the Kurds. Governor Lulian Guerrero and Delegate Michael San Nicolas offices had yet to respond to questions about the use of Guam as an evacuation site, but the chairman of the legislature's Military and Veterans Affairs Committee, Senator Jose Pido Terlahi, said if called upon to assist, Guam will help. If history calls upon us to temporarily host refugees of war again, as we've done in the past decades with Vietnamese and Iraqi Kurds, we will show the same spirit of Inafamalik we always had, Terlahi told the Post. If anyone understands the people's need for help in war, it's the people of Guam. So Terlahi makes a really good point, and then he wastes it by saying, I got to teach the military how to suck eggs. You know, they got a social distance. They know this stuff. Jose, you don't need to tell them that. Okay. Going on, the U.S. plans to complete the withdrawal of all American troops from Afghanistan on September 11. Advocates say it's too late to rely on special immigrant visa programs to bring Afghans along with their families into the United States. These Afghans face harm from the Taliban once American troops pull out of Afghanistan. Matthew Zeller, a co-founder of No One Left Behind, which helps former Afghan and Iraqi interpreters who settle on U.S. soil, said Guam is the best place to send Afghan interpreters in the interim. We're out of options. The time to save these people with special immigrant visa program is the 13 years it existed. We're out of time. It's Guam or bust, Zeller told Defense One, which delivers news, breaking analysis, and ideas on the topics and trends of U.S. defense and national security. The same Defense One piece quoted Representative Seth Moulton, a Democrat from Massachusetts, as agreeing to the use of Guam as an obvious option because the island was used to evacuate refugees of past wars. But he said he's also open to other options, etc. And we had senior national security correspondent Jacqueline Felcher saying pretty much the same thing. U.S. must hammer out an evacuation method for bringing the Afghan special immigrant visa applicants to a safe place, et cetera, on and on and on. So I also have a statement here from Hoa Nguyen, a Vietnamese who came here during Operation New Life, which I'd like to read. But I'm going to go to the front of the line myself, and I'm going to tell you what I would like to see. I'm not going to say it's what we should do or what we can do. I'm just going to tell you what I'd like to see. I'd like to see us do it and do it in spades. Say, for the governor to not wait, to send a letter to the president. President, I understand you're looking for a place to provide a safe haven to Afghan refugees. We, being the front line of the United States of America here in Asia, are glad to help. We've handled all kinds of adversity in the past. We're tough. We can do it. That's the Guam I want to see, not the Guam that's running around whining about what some Navy captain said in 1904.
Who's going to buy their coffee?
So let's hope that we could do that. Governor, that's what I'd like to see. If you do that, I will figure out some way to give you a blue star. But if you let the Bavakwaism of the island and the Protehila Texan, it'll be bad for the environment. Eco-fascists won't put up with it. So, I would like us to present ourselves as able, effective, hard-charging, tough people that can handle any challenge that's thrown at us, because we are. And the ones that want to whine about what a Navy captain said in 1904, that's out there in the lunatic fringe. It's a very small minority. So that's my final word for today. See you tomorrow.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Trying to keep parts of a key memo secret. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Justice Department has filed a late-night appeal of a federal judge's order to release a memo from the department's Office of Legal Counsel. It's a document which former Attorney General William Barr used in deciding against prosecuting former President Trump on obstruction charges during the Russia probe. The White House says it's the GOP's move next in talks toward an infrastructure spending plan.
The big hang-up now is how to pay for another spending bill. And even though Democrats chopped a few $1 billion off the bottom line of their original proposal, it is still too rich for Republicans, a very important group to consider, as the White House claims they want the way forward to be bipartisan.
Fox's Peter Ducey. The Biden administration's plan would spend more than double what the Republicans have proposed and includes things like child care, which have never before been considered as infrastructure. The FBI is investigating a suspicious package filled with white powder that arrived at Senator Rand Paul's home in Kentucky yesterday. On the outside of the envelope was a picture of a bruised and bandaged Paul with a gun to his head and a threat printed beneath it. More than 3 people have been shot to death in West Jefferson, Ohio. That's just west of Columbus, in a town where the police chief says they haven't had a single murder before yesterday in at least 7 years. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill into law to regulate social media platforms.
Big tech has amassed a massive amount of power. They are monopolies. They're monopolies that are much more powerful than the monopolies of the early 20th century, and they're using their power to enforce orthodoxy and to suppress speech and candidates that they disagree with.
Governor DeSantis on Fox's Hannity. The law provides daily fines to companies that deplatform candidates of statewide office and requires the companies to notify other users when they've been banned. Opponents say there could be a First Amendment challenge to the new law. America is listening to Fox News.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network.
Hey, this is Trey Gowdy, host of the Trey Gowdy Podcast. Every Tuesday, you'll hear what's on my mind. Plus, every Thursday, there's a special bonus episode where we answer the questions that are on your mind. Make sure to spend your Tuesdays and Thursdays with Trey. Subscribe now at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Hope to see you.
America's listening to Fox News. From the Fox News Podcasts Network, it's the Fox News Rundown. Start your day with a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. A daily morning podcast going far beyond the headlines, tapping